First of all, I'm going to go in the reverse order here and introduce Cathy. Cathy is standing in for Barbara. Barbara got 2 whammies this morning. She is sick, and her flight was canceled. So either way, she couldn't have made it, but Cathy is doing yeoman's work, filling in for Barbara. Thank you, Cathy. We got Syphers, I think you met him this morning, and we have Weisz, who everybody knows is the CEO of Marin Clean Energy. So, we're going to get started with you, Dawn, and here's your first question. Tell us about your programs in energy efficiency, local solar. What are the areas that you think other localities can learn from you?
Okay, so I'll start off with local programs, and we have a few. I'm going to go in chronological order, because the first programs that we launched after forming our community choice program was a feed-in tariff program and a net energy metering program. And those are both ways that we were able to incentivize more distributed solar throughout our service territory. And those have continued to really drive more solar installations. We have very high solar penetration in our community, and I think part of that is a result of our NEMS program, our net energy metering program. The feed-in tariff is, I'll say a little bit more about that. We basically pay an above market price for power that is built locally and fits into the criteria that we've laid out for the feed-in tariff, which means projects need to be at 1 megawatt size or less in order to qualify. And a tariff basically means that we have to pay for that power over a 20-year period, and it makes it easy for projects to get financed. And we've seen a lot of activity, particularly recently, around that. Also, we have recently launched an energy efficiency program. Well, we launched it back in 2012, but it's been growing quite a bit since then. And energy efficiency, any community choice program has statutory authority to receive California CPUC dollars as an administrator of energy efficiency programs. And I don't recommend doing it first or at the same time that you're launching your community choice program, because that's a lot to juggle, but it's a great thing to do after you've been up and running for a year or so. And it really adds a lot of value to those in the community. And the last thing I'll say as far as local solar is we found a couple of other creative ways to get local projects built in our service territory outside of the feed-in tariff. We have a 10.5 megawatt solar facility being built on a brownfield in our Richmond community, and this is going to require a minimum 50% local labor from the Richmond community. The selected contractor that's going to be overseeing the building lives in Richmond, and we worked with Richmond Build, a job training program for the last year to get folks in the community trained up to actually be able to build this project, and it's going to start construction in the next month or two. So this is an exciting opportunity and way to get local solar. And I'm sorry I said that was the last thing, but just one more, which is our local solar program is a program that allows customers to choose a 100% local solar product. If they are interested in having their usage tied to a local resource, they can choose this product and get a fixed rate for 20 years. It's a pretty steep premium at the beginning, but you do have a flat rate for up to 20 years as long as you stay in the program. And this is a great way to have customers drive the growth of new renewables. The more customers that sign up, the more local solar projects we can build. Great.
2 more questions for you, Dawn. There have been several regulatory and legislative victories for community choice since NCE started. What do you think the most important was, and what do you think the biggest challenge is on the horizon?
I think that, in hindsight, I think probably the biggest legislative hurdle was Prop 16, which was a PG&E-funded proposition that would have resulted in all of us probably not being here today, because there wouldn't have been the ability for community choice to happen across the state, given what was being proposed. So the failure of that proposition, I think, cleared the path for choice to continue happening in the state. I think also the proposed Bill 2145 was another having that fail was also very important because that would have been detrimental to new CCA programs in particular. And then I'll end with kind of I think one of the biggest wins on the legislative front was SB 790, the Charles McGlashan bill that created the Code of Conduct for investor-owned utilities. And that has, I think, had a real benefit in making sure that there's a more level playing field.
And what do you see on the horizon?
I think on the horizon, as we see more community choice programs starting up across the state, there's going to be more attention on fair cost allocation. I think that as we see bigger programs start, where you're going to have a big chunks of departing load for some of our investor-owned utilities, I think that the question of what is the role of an investor-owned utility, and does it make sense for them to kind of transition into being a transmission and distribution company, as we see around the country with a lot of other programs. The distribution function maintains a monopoly, but the generation can have some diversity and provide for some choice. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that transition occurs in California, and I'm sure there will be some regulatory engagement in that. And I also think that as we move towards implementation of SB 350, increasing the renewable portfolio standard, the rules around that and how they're implemented is going to be important for us to be engaged in. But I think that is a very exciting effort, because it'll, again, sort of level the playing field a bit and help ensure that the investor-owned utilities are catching up to where the rest of us are with renewables in our mix. Very good.
Geof, please give us your 1-minute pitch on the benefits of community choice.
I think Russ Hancock put it pretty well this morning, and I guess the way I'd reframe his message is that community choice is a way of capturing a revenue stream that is large, producing both bonding capacity, financing capacity, net revenues for the purpose of anything related to energy in your region. And that's extraordinary, because if you think about energy, one of the initiatives that we're extremely focused on right now is electric vehicles. And it's a triple win if you hit electric vehicles. Huge reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, even on PG&E or SEE's portfolio, but even more when you go on to a community choice portfolio that's even cleaner. You've got today, at worst, equal cost to a consumer to own and operate that vehicle, and in the future those costs are going to decline. So we're actually going to see cost savings, so it's more affordable. And then if you do it right and you manage the charging in an aggregated way, then you can actually support the addition of more renewables onto the grid. So the biggest challenge, I think, is we've been operating historically where we dispatch power plants to meet the supply, to meet the demand that we say we want. But in the future, with solar and wind and lots of variable resources, we're going to have to dispatch load to match supply in equal measure. And so electric vehicles, to us, is a huge part of that solution, because if we can modulate that current and manage charging, it's going to be a major piece of that.
You anticipated the second question, which was about the EV plans that Sonoma Clean Power has. So do you want to take a little bit more and talk about what the plan is?
Yeah, so the plan is to change the way we think about transportation. And to start with the most ambitious piece, it's to really disentangle car ownership from transportation. It no longer makes any sense really to expect that even 30 years from now, everyone should own their own vehicles and they should sit idle 95% of the time. Autonomous taxis are not that far in our future, but long before we get there, we can get enormous benefits by building out the parts of the distribution grid that would support electric vehicles, not just for the reasons I stated, but also because that builds local jobs and it redirects in our county about $350 million a year from flowing out of the county to now supporting electric resources, many of which we can source inside our county. Certainly not all of them right now. But that's a huge amount. That's an amazing investment in jobs, in local infrastructure, and so forth. And so I think The real initiative is get 10,000 electric vehicles onto the road with managed charging in Sonoma County by the end of 2020. It's called Drive Evergreen. It's a partnership of the California Independent System Operator. The governor's office is heartily behind this. Lawrence Berkeley Labs is in the partnership. We're headed out to RMI to be part of their eLab accelerator and try and get the details down. But the notion is manage that entire fleet as an aggregated resource and use it as a virtual power plant. It is a zero carbon power plant. For now, just manage the rate of charging. In the future, think about bidirectional flow. It's not really in the warranty of many of the makers yet, and you require interconnection agreements. But in the future, that bidirectional flow makes the system about 8 times more valuable. And so that's the resource that we've been waiting for, because it's an enormous load. If you electrify all transportation in California today, you almost double the electric use of the grid. So this is a huge opportunity as well as a huge challenge. And it's going to require doing it in smart ways that don't build out the transmission infrastructure. We don't need more transmission to do this. We need more distribution infrastructure, and we need smart distributed resources, but that's where good management comes in.
Question for Geof. How did Sonoma Clean Power obtain financing, and how might this experience apply to other communities?
Is Grant Davis still on the run? Grant, are you here? Cordell? Stand up. They left? Seriously? All right, Sonoma County Water Agency. Sonoma County Water Agency was our angel. They're another public agency in our county, and they really took the early risk money and lent us $1.7 million at 3% interest. So if you should be so lucky, take it. But you know, they were followed very quickly by a local bank. And so First Community Bank of Santa Rosa took another risk, which is even before we had power contracts in service, they did step in and offer a loan at a higher rate because it was riskier money, and then provided bridge financing in addition to that. So you need cash flow coverage for you need to pay your bills before all your customers have paid theirs. It's that early money that's the hard part, and I think we had a session where we were talking about a few ideas, but this is an area where the state could really step in. And you know, for those who weren't in that session, the nutshell is that in my view, $50 million statewide could start every CCA program with the at-risk money, probably indefinitely. It could be a rolling fund. This is a trivial amount of money for the state of California to produce the benefits community choice can bring. And what I'm talking about is that $500,000 to $2 million that it takes to get to signed power contracts and commitments to serve customers, because that's when a bank can step in. That's when the riskiest part is over. So there are some banks here today. Talk to them about that second stage and what they would want to see before that second stage starts. But I think it's that early part that we'd love to see state money. But the other piece is, I think if we went after private funds, this business model supports paying private rates. And so if you had to pay 10% or 15% for that money, it's worth it, because you can pay it back in less than a year. So I think there's a lot of options, and when you're thinking about startup money, think differently than a government traditionally does. You don't have to get money at 2% or 3% or 4%.
Very good. I want to remind you about questions. So if you have questions, use cards and put them up so that they can be collected. All right, Barbara. Cathy.
We wish it was Barbara.
How far along is Lancaster in rolling out to customers, and what have been the main challenges so far?
Well, Lancaster we started serving load to our early enrollees and municipal customers in May of 2015. It was less than 1,000 accounts. And then in October of 2015, so just a few months ago, we did our mass enrollment, which was about 50,000 accounts. So the challenges, we are the first operating CCA in SoCal Edison territory. So we had some challenges related to just how to do this together as a partner with Edison, a partner with utility. Billing, how the data flowed back and forth. We had issues with the data that came from the number of accounts to the accuracy of the load forecasting. So having that initial phase 1 and having it restricted to our municipal accounts was actually an unintended excellent way to do it. We didn't know that it would be so helpful, but it did allow us to work with Edison and work out a lot of the issues and work with our service provider that helped us refine things so that when we had our mass enrollment in October, things went a lot more smoothly.
Your next question. Lancaster chose a different route to financing using a municipal enterprise fund. Tell us a little bit about this, why you went this route, and how it might apply to other communities. And please do also touch on how you protect the general fund.
Well, this is, Barbara would be the best to answer this. She not only is the director of Lancaster Choice Energy, but she's also our finance director. So this was really Barbara's doing. But we set up an enterprise fund so that the general fund was protected. The general fund did lend money to Lancaster Choice Energy. Lancaster Choice Energy is a department of the city. It's not its own entity. And the way that we set up our initial purchases for power, we used a mechanism that would also protect the general fund through language of the contracts.
Lancaster has made some bold commitments on solar. How is your implementation of local solar going? Where do you hope to go, and what obstacles do you have to overcome?
I'm sorry, could you say the first part of the
Sure.
question? I didn't.
Lancaster has made some bold commitments on solar.
Yes, it has.
So, how is that going? Where do you hope to go, and what obstacles did you have to overcome?
Lancaster, for those of you that do not know, we have a mayor who's very dedicated to a net zero policy. And so one of the first, and that's what ultimately got us to forming a CCA, but one of the first things that he did when this became an important issue to him was to pass an ordinance that required all new construction have solar as a part of it. So any new construction now that happens within the city of Lancaster must have solar. We are in the desert. We're part of the Mojave Desert in North Los Angeles County. So we are rich in solar resources. We have utility scale projects out there. One of the obstacles is the public and how we communicate those issues to them. Some of them don't like all the solar that they see. There's a lot of land out there. And I think one of the things that we've done with our solar partners is create benefits to the community. So those members of the community, for instance, partnering with a school where the solar companies help fund, parking lot repaving, things like that. So what we've done basically is turned our solar partners into community members that contribute favorably to our community.
Dawn, why did MCE's first local solar project cost, quote, above market price? Is the new local solar project less money?
The new local solar project is still a bit above market, not as much as the first ones. I think many of us know that the cost of solar since 2010 when we launched has come down pretty dramatically, which is great. And we've been able to take advantage of that in our procurement, which is great. But local projects and smaller projects just tend to cost more. I think that land cost can be a factor, but also the infrastructure that's needed for a project. You still need a lot of the same infrastructure in place for a small project as you do for a big project, so you don't achieve the same economies of scale. Also, the transaction costs can be equivalent in some cases. So those are some reasons, but I think that the 10.5 megawatt project is coming in certainly much lower than our feed-in tariff projects, but that's because of the scale. That's a large project. It's going to be the second largest in the Bay Area. It's 80,000 panels on 49 acres, so that one has a lot of scale to it, and that's helped with the price.
Jeff, this is about EVs and vehicle grid. How will compensating EVs for their power to support the grid become revenue positive? And currently, infrastructure charging stations that has the capacity to do bidirectional charging is cost prohibitive to entrants. And it says, as a note, vehicle-to-grid charging stations are upwards of $50,000 per vehicle.
So, we're inventing something, right? And the prototype is expensive. The vehicle-to-grid element of the value of managing loads is not essential. We don't have to do that. We don't have to flow from the car's battery back into the grid to be a benefit. That just makes the benefit larger because then you can supply, you can participate in the ISO's non-generating resource market. You can eventually participate as a capacity resource for those technical people out there. But the value is really significant even if you just curtail. Even if you just say when wholesale prices go over a certain threshold or when renewable resources are not available, let's trim back how fast cars are charging. Car chargers today, every charger out there, can be trimmed. It doesn't have to be turned off. You can go from 100% down to 95. The consumer, the driver doesn't notice this. It makes no difference to them. If you have a statistically large enough population of drivers and chargers out there, then this can be seamless to them. And you can even set preferences so that it starts to learn. These drivers want to take their car out in the morning at 5 a.m., a little earlier than the average driver. They can make sure they're fully charged by that point. So you can really kind of tailor it. But the real goal, if you can envision this for a minute. So here's the cool part of community choice. We've put this idea on the table, and every time we talk about it, it gets better because people challenge us and they say, well, you forgot about low-income customers, or you forgot about the used car market, or you forgot about this or that. We get to refine this as we go, and we get to do it incredibly fast. This idea first arrived for us the day that the governor lost the element in Senate Bill 350 that was to reduce petroleum by 50% by 2030. And is Rusty here? Rusty, stand up, man. You here? He went out with the water agency guys. All right. So Rusty came to me and he said, we can do that. Let's just do it in Sonoma County. Let's cut petroleum use 50% by 2030. Let's just set the example. And so what shook out of that was, in a couple of weeks, was a meeting to figure out, all right, how are we actually going to achieve this goal, and what's the J-curve of adoption of electric vehicles? You, by the way, Lancaster just got how many buses?
85. Well, 85.
85
a contract for 85
electric buses. That's huge, by the way. And so, I mean, this kind of creativity and fast response. We can set a new rate theoretically in 30 days at the next board meeting. It really takes us more like 3 months, but we can do it quickly. It's not a 3-year process at CPUC. We can approve a new program very quickly. We can innovate. We can do it at small scale. So we can spend $50,000, $100,000, see if a program works. If it does, then you invest the $1 million, $2 million, and up. And that kind of innovative creativity is what makes this exciting, because failure isn't a problem. It's a data point. You learned something, and it didn't cost you, it didn't hurt your ratepayers very much money. You learned a ton, and it comes back to you all, and you do it better, and then we learn from you. So this is a truly open source process where we can learn incredibly fast and adapt, and that's what excites me.
Very good. Cathy, Barbara and Jason of Lancaster suggested to us, the city of Encinitas, to postpone or even skip the CCA feasibility plan in favor of writing an implementation plan first. Is it really possible to skip the feasibility plan? Is any jurisdiction trying this option?
Well, I can tell you my thoughts. I don't know exactly what their thoughts are, but I think this is your feasibility study. It works under different models. I think that there are feasibility studies available to look at. I think if you build a pro forma and you put in the numbers and you have people that know what they're doing, giving you input on what other fees and costs are associated. I don't think it's as complicated as the process that we went through in Lancaster. We went through an enormous feasibility study that was quite extensive and very expensive, and I think it's feasible.
If I might add on to that, I think what I'd say is a feasibility study today is a political exercise, and you might need to do it for that reason.
Yeah.
But do it for that reason.
Yeah.
Don't do it because you need the data out of it. Do it because you need some cover, and that's fine. But recognize that that's the value of it right now.
Very good.
To all panelists, why don't our tariffs change in a way that incentivizes use of surplus renewable energy? Retail rates are typically highest when solar production is at its peak.
Who would like to take that?
Yeah, I can start. I'd love to hear what other folks think. I think that the energy industry historically hasn't moved very fast. It hasn't adopted to change very quickly. And I think that's what we're seeing. I think that folks in the industry are aware of the problem, but getting the solutions spelled out and then implemented takes a lot of time. And I think that we're in the middle of that process right now. And it's an area where we've experienced some frustration because we're trying to shave load during the peak hours of the day, but we get absolutely no financial benefit from that whatsoever. And so we're really hoping that those market signals align soon so that we can really expand and amplify our ability to do that, and so that customers can expand their ability to do that. I think that one other thing that is relevant with this is that because there's a complexity, and because the peak times change depending on the season, I think that the timing is excellent. That there's so much ability to do automated control of systems, and I think the more that we can automate how load is when it's used, for charging, for example, when it's not used, if we can turn off water heaters at a certain time, that can have a lot of benefits without the customers having to become educated and know when is the right time to turn things on or off. But in order for us to develop those types of mechanisms, we need the pricing signals so that we don't lose money every time we implement a program that's good for the state but costs us money.
Yeah, I'd just add the lag is really key because time of use is shifting, of course, later in the evening now that residential is driving the spike in effective load, and behind-the-meter solar is driving that further. But keep in mind, it's not just when a resource is available, it's also how much it's utilized. So if you've got a natural gas plant that's running from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m., and that's the only time it runs in 24 hours, you're going to pay a lot for that plant. And so we need to solve that problem too, which is how much are we utilizing the resources we're investing in? And that's a tough time of day. Solar's coming off, wind hasn't started in California, and storage isn't really there yet. And so we need better rate structures, but we also need better load management, and we probably need a lot more creative ideas than that. So that kind of evening peak period is going to get more important over time.
You said it very well.
All right, so Cathy, actually, I'm going to start with you on this question. How do you plan to stay competitive with the utilities in the next 3 to 5 years? And what do you see is your competitive advantage over the utilities? And I'm directing this question to you first because in the previous panel you talked about that was one of your biggest challenges, willing to solve it.
Right. I think, as I just mentioned, we put our pro forma together based on certain things, saw that we could be competitive and moved forward. Since then, market conditions have changed. As I spoke in the breakout session, staying competitive is a big deal for us. The demographics of our community is such that they're more concerned about, am I paying a better price, than what the renewable content of that energy is. So we have to stay competitive. And through the process, rates have bounced around a lot, and they've gone down as of January, but due to favorable market conditions and costs being less than we expected them to be. And of course, we have a very conservative finance director who couldn't be here today, but she did a really good job in ensuring that the numbers really worked for us and that we had that room if we needed to. So we've also got some long-term contracts, so we've locked in on pricing. We are not a JPA that will be adding territories. We are pretty much, this is the number of accounts that we will have. Our opt-out rates have stabilized, so this is kind of it. And now we work at other things. Geof mentioned the electric buses. So, we're looking at other ways to bring things to the community that will give us a competitive edge. We're working, on different programs and doing things to retain our top customers. We're now moving away from yes, we're in it, we're competitive, and now how can we be of greater value to our customers than the utility would be. So, and we've just finished, so we're just embarking on some of those things. We're putting together an energy efficiency program, and the top 20 customers, what can we do for them? Looking at some of our larger users, and as Dawn was talking about, the community solar, maybe putting together something specific for those customers. So that's kind of how we're looking at retaining that competitive edge.
Jeff? 3 to 5 years, how are you going to stay competitive?
I guess, so one thing that might be useful to share on that point is that my expectations when I first started in this role was that we'd be wanting to save 30 to 50% of our net income as reserves to build, financial strength. And what I learned is it should be more like 95% or 90%. Building financial strength, especially in your first 5 years or so, makes everything better. Power contracts come down in price. Your ability to buy more renewable energy goes dramatically up. Your risk profile to anybody doing business with you changes, and so therefore your costs go down. Your ability to do financing for programs improves. Your long-term viability for having competitive rates improves. And what I really had to realize is that taking funds out of the program early on in very significant quantities was going to actually reduce our ability to spend money. And that was, it's sort of obvious in hindsight, but it's advice I would share, because I think that working as if you're going to get a credit rating and want to bond for $1 billion in 5 or 6 or 7 years is a fantastic way to behave, because it means you're getting ready for things that you don't know might happen. Risk management. What if you get hit with an $8 million charge for something you weren't expecting? That can happen in the power industry. That kind of scale of thing can actually occur. You want to be ready for that. You want to be prepared so that doesn't take you down. A short-term spike in the commodity market. All kinds of things can go wrong. So when you hear at an event like this how rosy things are, remember, take care of the risks. There's plenty of risks out there. And I think preparing for that when times are good is really the mantra. And that helps you in so many other ways. You're not going to be left holding the bag. And that's critical.
Dawn.
I think I'll start by saying that our current integrated resource plan has us on a track to achieve 80% renewable energy as our default product within the next 10 years, and to be 95% carbon free in that same time frame. So by 2025, that's the path that we're on. And so how do we stay competitive while offering that type of product to our customers? We have a couple of strategies. I think the first is diversity of suppliers, diversity of technologies. We don't want to buy only one technology and leave the others out. We need to have some base load resources mixed in with the intermittent resources. Diversity in our vintages, meaning that we don't buy, thank goodness we didn't buy all of our solar in 2010, 2011. We were cautious. We bought a little bit at a time, and we've been able to take advantage of the pricing in the current market. And then we've also had diversity as far as location. So building some bigger things where there's less cost to do so, but then also layering in some local things that might cost more, but not doing, if we did all local, only local, we wouldn't be able to stay competitive. So we have to have a mix of both. I think the other strategy that we have to stay competitive is focusing on stable rates. We can't predict or follow what the IOU's rates are going to be for generation, but we can plan for what our rates are going to be by locking in long-term supply contracts. And so we have a lot of 20-year contracts in our portfolio, 25-year contracts, and that ensures a lot of stability, and I think that's a really important strategy. I was going to also echo building reserves, and I think Geof said it very well. That's important, and that's a big part of our strategy to stay competitive. And then the last thing I'll say is having value-add programs that really give back to the community and give them value that they don't currently get from the current energy efficiency programs, and giving them, our vision is to give them a single point of contact for everything related to energy, whether it be electric vehicle charging or battery storage or solar hot water heating on your roof, or traditional energy efficiency and window replacements. We want to be able to help customers through all of that, rather than them having to find different buckets of people and different buckets of incentive money to do the various things they're interested in. I think if we can provide those types of value-add programs to customers, it helps with our competitive strength.
What is the role of baseload renewables such as geothermal that are not dispatchable in the marketplace that is focusing on flexibility?
Super critical. I'd say resources like geothermal are immensely valuable, and there aren't very many resources like it. So either zero carbon or very, very low carbon. I think the highest emission geothermal is about 1/15 of natural gas or something. So it's a fantastic resource. What's valuable about baseload is, and this is something I think everyone here should know, the days of just buying unbundled renewable energy credits, or just buying solar, or just buying wind in a portfolio are over. Those days are over. We now have to start thinking about what's coming in the future. What's coming in the future is you need a portfolio that looks similar, doesn't have to be identical, but looks similar to your load profile. And if it's different by a bit, don't worry about it yet, because the imbalance market takes care of that, as long as it's reasonable. But the more long-term procurement you can do that starts to match your actual load profile, the better. And what renewable resources are running all the time? It's geothermal, a little bit of biomass out there, a little bit of biogas, which has some question marks, and hydro, which isn't called renewable in California. All right, so hydro, unless it's small hydro, isn't called renewable in the state of California. So you have a very limited palette, because your two cheapest sources of legally, definitionally renewable in California are solar and wind. And so I think geothermal is a critical component in a resource mix if you can get it. And obviously it's very limited in California. We have a fantastic resource in our backyard. The geysers up in Sonoma and Lake counties are one of the biggest facilities on the planet. But if you can't get geothermal, start looking for some similar kind of resource, because having some base load is going to be valuable under long-term contract.
Unless you, Cathy, or Don has something burning, I'm going to take the next question, which may be our last question, depending on how your answers go. Someday, when there are 24 successful CCAs around the state, how will CCA programs that serve their local priorities coordinate so that solar, EV, and EE service providers don't have to respond to 24 completely different organizations?
I'll take that. I'll take the first. We have actually been discussing this. The four existing CCAs, or counting San Francisco as existing, because they're doing it. We've been talking about creating some type of association where we can coordinate on things like that. And there's a lot that could come of that, including shared information for folks that has kind of been pre-vetted. Geof was talking about in the last session potentially best practices that could be helpful for new emerging CCAs. There could be, maybe this is a far-off idea, but maybe there's a type of rate and product that we'd want to offer statewide with a certain resource that we find. So I think there's a lot of potential for collaboration, and the four of us really recognize the importance of that, not just for our own well-being and supporting each other, which has been really valuable, I think, to all of us. But I think it will also have benefits statewide for those that are in the CCAs. So we're aligned with the need for that, and we're looking into it right now.
I'd add that I think power pooling authorities are commonplace. Irrigation districts and munis and others have been doing this for a very long time. And so purchasing around the state for the benefit of the public is an old tradition. It's as old as the investor-owned utilities and then some. So I think that's something that community choice can begin to work with the existing power pooling authorities if they want to play. SCAPA and NCPA and others take note. I don't know if you're here today, but it's also something we could form on our own, and it may be more effective to form it on our own if they don't step up soon. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
Yes, covered it.
Amen. Very well.
All right, well then, let's end on this question, and then I have one other fun activity for us. What's your one most important piece of advice to a community starting a program now? And we'll start with you, Cathy.
Wow. I don't know. I guess maybe the relationships that you build, they're wonderful. They help you. I don't know. There's so many things.
All right, top two.
Top two. I guess not to be afraid, just to go. We didn't know what we were doing. We just did it. And I think if we knew, we might not have watched ahead. So just do it. It's fantastic. There's a huge learning curve, but there's amazing people there to help you along the way. And, it's a great thing. It was a great thing for Lancaster.
Okay, I'm gonna hold be bold, do it, get started. I'm gonna pair that with under promise so that you beat everyone's expectations every time. Because you're living in a political world. And so when we were starting, the original design was 50% renewables, so we rolled out with 33. Well, we actually did 36 in our first year, and we're going to do more in the next year. So then we were a success story instead of a failure. We said looks like we could probably match PG&E's rates roughly, and we actually beat them by about 5% in the first day. And so that kind of setting of expectations is I guess what I'd say, is be a success story. Don't overpromise, and don't let the people who want you to be perfect win. Being perfect is a trap. You can't be. Solar has problems, wind has problems, hydro has, everything has problems. You're not eliminating problems. You're just making the world much, much, much better. That's it.
Yeah, and mine would be, you don't have to know everything to get started. You have to be motivated and follow the good advice that we just heard. But in addition to that, you have to find folks with deep experience and expertise and technical knowledge to help you move forward. And I have to do a shout out because I get a lot of recognition for being part of the first CCA effort. And I just want to say it was a team effort. And there were a number of folks that I could not have that we could not have launched without having. I think our technical team, John DeLelsi and Kirby Dussel were a big part of it. Beth, who I see in the back, and a lot of the rest of the MCE team. Stand up, you guys, because you get a lot of the credit too. I think finding. John DeLelsi is here too. If you're here, you should stand up. This has just been a team effort, and I recommend that you find partners that can really that have the expertise and the technical depth to give you good advice and form a strong program that can stand the test of time.
Okay. So let's do one more round for our panel.